Hello and welcome back to another YouTube video, and in today's video it is the next GC and A-level help video, and it is the American Civil Law. It's the Y300 series section. However, of course, the actual structure in the first third of the video that I show you can apply to any of them. I'm specifically focusing on the American Y319 Civil Rights 1865 and the Civil War 1992 George H.W. Bush presidency textbook. And again, I would also recommend you also purchase Nicholas Fellowes' History Art Again A. It's incredibly helpful. It really helps a lot and really helped me in my exams, particularly when it comes to structure and coursework. So here we have. It's personally, I think it is a pretty nice question. I think it's a 30 marker and it's on the longest paper, so it seems as if it should be the most daunting question, but I don't think it is. I much more consider the 30 mark on the Y100 series one the hardest question. I think this is really quite a nice one because not only have you got two interpretations, so it's easy to get your teeth into them, but also you don't need provenance, which I'll get onto later. So again, structure, I personally do intro, paragraph 1, paragraph 2, conclusion. Intro, paragraph 1, the main one you think is the most convincing, paragraph 2, one you think is the least convincing, and of course the conclusion. You could do 4 paragraphs, I guess, but personally I would just do 2. You can just go really in depth. And again, you know, that whole argument about structure, the examiners don't care heavily about how you structure your answer, as long as you've got what I'm about to tell you next. You know, that's the key. As long as you've got the key ingredients, even if you write 50 paragraphs, it's fine, you'll still get full marks. But again, generally, I would consider that structure. So how do you actually do the question? Well, is your point, main line of argument, pretty self-explanatory. What are you going to talk about? Right off the bat, discuss what it is. This is most important because this is least important because then you quote directly from the interpretation. When you are quoting directly from the interpretation, spell things right and make sure your grammar is correct. Otherwise, it just looks bad on you, and examiners are going to be not impressed when they read it. And of course, explaining that quote and using your own knowledge to really properly start diving deeper into the question. I think this is probably the most critical part in terms of being able to do the rest of it. You know, if you haven't got your own knowledge, you're really going to struggle with the interpretation. It's a common myth. You know, people think, oh, I don't need to revise the 30 markers. All the information's there on a whole A4 piece of paper for me. Not the case. And of course, own knowledge, you know, is self-explanatory. You need own knowledge of history. And then you need to evaluate, of course, constantly using evaluation. Well, this is convincing, but alternatively, in the 1930s, actually 250,000 African Americans gained literacy, for instance. Or well, actually, in 1924, the Native Americans gained citizenship. However, this is not exactly what they wanted. Stuff like that. And yeah, consider synthesis. I put a little star next to this one because it's a bit of a mixed bag of an opinion. I personally would consider a bit of synthesis in interpretation. It's not specifically on the mark scheme, but I would do it personally because it just makes it, A, gives you more to talk about, and B, it makes your answer, I think, flow better when you consider the whole course. You know, it isn't needed. Some specialists may tell you otherwise. You can listen to who you want, but I personally would say do include a bit of synthesis, although literally perhaps just a sentence or two before the conclusive statement, like, oh, but generally this pattern is correct because throughout the Black Power period, women were, stuff like that, you know. And then finally, of course, linking it back to the question. So point, evidence, explain, really just a bit of quoting and evaluation there as well. So, of course, you need your significance, evaluation, coherency. Again, this is absolutely vital. Make sure you include all of this if you want that A-star answer. Talk about only relevant things. Always evaluate, constantly consider and argue against the question, and weigh it up. And coherency, make sure for a sustained line of argument. There you'll get the A-star. Significance, evaluation, coherency. And then finally, some tips at the end here. First of all, always discuss both interpretations. It sounds obvious, but again, some of my students spend so long on one interpretation, they barely write like 5 lines for the next. You need to consider both of them. Again, that evaluation, you need to consider both, and significance. And I underline this one, that this is one of the most important facts to take away. If you take nothing else away from this video, take this away from it. You do not discuss provenance in the interpretation. You do not discuss provenance in the interpretation. It's highly important you remember that, because it is not asking you for that. Its interpretation is not a source, no provenance. Don't discuss it at all. You will not get credit at all. And again, always consider evaluation. Challenge the source interpretation. See, I nearly made a mistake myself. Always challenge the interpretations and what they're saying and why it is being said. Down to the historiography background to it. So there are the tips. We'll now look at a 30 marker, a fresh one. I'll tell you how to go through it, look at examiners' reports, and yeah, we'll be cooking. So here then, we have got a 30 marker loaded up here on notes again. So It is on labour rights. Yep, labour rights. So we got labour rights during the Gilded Age 30 marker. Both of the two passages, which is more convincing. Again, as an explanation, convincing explanation, if you use that in your argument, again, you're looking back to the question, you've got your CDA and SEC coherency. Weakness in organised labour during the Gilded Age. So, first of all, we've only got two sources of interpretation. I've done it again, interpretation. Don't talk about provenance, interpretation to discuss here, so I think it's pretty nice. So, passage A, I'll have a little read through. Again, you can read it through. I won't blurt it out loud because I don't know, that doesn't feel right to me. Okay, right off the bat, that's a really good point. Yes, of course, Haymarket Fair was 1886 in Chicago. And who else was blamed for this? Of course, it was immigrants, and I don't know how I'm going to fit that on the page, but yeah, immigrants. That's why immigrants on the page. Immigrants. I'm not quite sure what politician I was pretending to be there anyway. Yeah, of course, Homestead Strike. This is a really nice source interpretation. If I say that again, I don't even know what 1892 was the Homestead Strike in Pennsylvania. Henry Frick, of course, put it down suppressively with Andrew Carnegie's help, a Scotsman. And also they've referenced the Pullman Strike, of course, that's of 1894 in Chicago as well. And of course, Grover Cleveland, a president who greatly opposed trade union rights. Yes, and again, that division in labour, white workers. Division in labour, why? On race. Running out of room here, aren't we? Race, gender. Race, gender, and skill. That's what labour rights are divided on. Race, gender, and skill. Yep, scab labour. So you'd actually make this link here with this, the Homestead Strike, the sentence scab labour. So look how quickly we're already getting a lot of things down here, guys. Good bit of our own knowledge, absolutely blurting everywhere. Yeah, the new immigrants from Europe and Asia. And of course that led to the 1907 Exclusion Acts, which of course kicked out, prevented, had great quotas on the number of Japanese and Chinese migrants that are allowed to come into the country. And many find it hard to join the unions, of course, such as the American Federation of Labour, greatly restricted how many they could come in until the Congress of Industrial Organisation was formed. And again, employers exploit them because why? The workforce is weakened. It's not a unified aim founded on gender, skill, and ethnicity. Therefore, it cannot present a unified, coherent force. Hence, why position of labour was quite weak during the Gilded Age. So that's all very, very good there. If we look at the second passage, I find that very convincing, but only to an extent. Why? Well, for that little mail, I used a pen. Get our pen here. Let's do yellow. This highly is critical of the view. There's no positive point at all. Let's see what passage B has to offer. Yep, right, that division within the workforce, we've already mentioned them, so I won't write that again, but that's a good thing to include. I'll definitely quote that. Definitely relatable to the question. Significance. Hence, in times of unrest, again, scab labourers like Homestead Strike, white Americans and immigrants, workers are laid off and replaced by black labour. Or again, poverty and need to survive. Now, synthesis can be brought in here, like I said, a bit of the wobbly one, but I definitely would include it. Why? Well, You can talk about the 1929-1933 Great Depression. Of course, outside the period, but again, it's that general overarching view. Sometimes labour rights is weakened simply by economic situations. People are happy just to have a job in the Great Depression. 6 million unemployed. People are just happy to have a job. Therefore, they don't really want to strike. They don't really want to improve their rights because they're just simply about wanting to have a job. Just looking back at the question. Weak position of organised labour. Okay, got it. Yeah, this one's a bit more evaluative. This one, I think this one is more convincing because it talks about both positives, negatives, to the view other than just the employees themselves, but also the employers. Certain factors to power of the employer. One source I think was the less fair policy pursued by the government, such as, again I said, Grover Cleveland followed, and Andrew Johnson, and not Calvin Coolidge, what was his name? One before Franklin D. Roosevelt. Herbert Hoover. For that less fair policy, minimum governmental interference, therefore, the employees could have maximum capitalism, maximum monopolies, and exploit the labour force as much as they wanted to maximise their profits, negative impact on workers' well-being, and their resentment towards their employers. Like Henry Ford. Yep, cut wages, lay off workers. Again, you can link that to the 1894 Pullman strike. Use of armed forces. The event strike was not unusual, such as, again, that 1892 Homestead strike. And again, look a little bit key point to include there. The fact that not only the authorities but also the courts reported that employers further limited the element of labour representation. So I personally think passage B here is more convincing because it doesn't talk about just the impact, negative things employees face, but also why the employers dish them out, why the government dishes them out, and how the fact that the Supreme Court at the end there is not on the workers' side. Therefore, passage B, in my opinion, is probably more convincing. So yeah, let's have a look at the examiner's reports for this question. And first, mark scheme, however. So in these 30 markers, it's about analysis, evaluation in relation to historical context, so just knowledge really in historiography, different ways in which aspects of the past have been interpreted. My neck really hurts. So yeah, just I don't think that's really anything new there. We've already discussed it in the video, but here. So to get level 6, A-star level answer, 26 to 30 marks, like 90-95%. The answers are very good focus on the question throughout. It is a thorough and sustained evaluation, of the interpretation, using detailed and accurate knowledge of the historical context and wider historical debate, that's also knowledge around the issue. It will use a convincing and supported narrative in their relation to the question. So in practice, you have a look at the examiner's report for this question. Both passages were well understood. Again, students tend to understand passages well. The own knowledge they tend to have. However, many candidates were able to access to higher levels by clearly linking their own knowledge to the interrogation, the views, or the reasons for the weak position of organised labour in the Gilded Age. Most were able to point to passages a focus on union division and passages wider view of the negative role of employers and failing the federal government. Many times to be more convincing arguments, such as us. This is looking good for us. There is no need to bring in any other named historians' views, and fewer candidates were tempted by this, which is good. You can't bring in provenance. Other candidates have such good knowledge and were able to link this to passages by using evaluative language, such as supported by, rather than describing events. Again, that's key terminology there. That's the C, the coherency, sustained line of argument. Less successful responses had limited knowledge and resorted to using the context of passage B to validate passage A, which is not what they want. You have to use your own knowledge, you can't be using interpretations, and vice versa. Furthermore, where one knowledge was used for passage B, it was often outside the period, such as the Violent of 1935 or Legal Pact 1963. There was also reluctance to weigh up the limitations of each argument as well as the strengths. Yes, again, it's a bit of a dodgy one there, like I said. You can't just make a whole argument on a factor outside the period like the Violent Act 1935 or, Patco's Strike 1981. There has to be the main arguments to come from the period in the Gilded Age, so, end of the American Civil War to World War One. But you can, within that, I think, make links as, also evident by the fact Herbert Hoover was laissez-faire, like Grover Cleveland, for instance. There was also reluctance to weigh up the limitation of each argument, so again, not many people are evaluating. You don't evaluate, you don't get the highest marks, whereas the strengths. Too often responses fell back on the passage fails to mention, followed by descriptive lists. A strong evaluation will weigh up the merits of the argument in each passage before coming to a balanced judgment based on strengths and weaknesses. So that is what they are looking for. So that is how you answer your 30 marker for the American Civil Rights paper. Any questions, let me know in the comment section down below. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you in the next YouTube video. Goodbye.